Welcome to Check Your Shelf, a book podcast on the Alabama Take Network. I'm your host, Jamie Hanna. This month, I'm excited to have my friend and fellow librarian, Sedona Brewer, on the pod to talk about our favorite underrated books.
My name is Sedona. I work at a public library in technical services.
Yes.
So I kind of see the behind the scenes part of the library.
Yeah.
I live in Huntsville, Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
I'm from Lawrenceburg, Tennessee.
Very cool.
Small town.
Small town.
Not
to
exciting.
To big city.
Small town to big city.
Yeah.
And I love to read.
You are one of the more prolific readers.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of times, I'll see like the things in your Goodreads, and I get very ashamed that I'm not trying harder.
No, it comes with seeing all the books that come through the library system.
Yeah,
I see them all.
So, how many books do you think you read a month? Just a guesstimate.
One. Lately, one.
Yeah,
I really am not that prolific. Quantity wise,
right.
I read a lot of different things.
Yeah,
but not a lot. I'm a really slow reader, honestly. Yeah. If it wasn't for audiobooks, I would have hardly any book reading count.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
I love audiobooks, especially nonfiction.
I feel like my to be read list is like chef's kiss. Like, it's beautiful. Like, that's what I want to talk to people about. But then it's when you see like the very small list of things I actually get around to reading.
I don't do a TBR list.
You don't?
I don't. I used to, and it stressed me out so much at the sheer volume of things I knew I would never actually read. So I don't do it anymore, and it really helps.
I bet that's liberating.
It is. I have no constraints. I can just pick up whatever, but I do own hundreds of books that I've never read. So I need to focus on what's in my home.
I've talked on here before about what a mess my Goodreads account. Well, it was in a worse mess before I started this podcast, and I've cleaned it up a little. But I mean, I look at my to be read on there, and it's like every book I have walked by in a bookstore since 2011 is on that list. Like, I just feel like that's my archive. Like, that's what I'm going to go back to. And I have pulled, I want to say last year, one book from that to be read list, because with us being librarians, and like you said, we see all the good stuff come through, and we see the new stuff. Like, it's hard to run out of.
It's very
things.
Distracting. That's why I don't read the books that I own. I just see them here.
Just see them here. Yeah. My aunt the other day, I was talking to her about a book recommendation. She was asking for one. I was like, I bought that book actually. I was like, I have it in a hard copy of it if you want it. And she was like, you buy books? And I was like, oh, the shame runs deep. I'm like, there are library books. A book of the month is going to be its own podcast later this summer because of the severe addiction I have
to stop that
to book. Oh, it's awful. And then I still go to Barnes and Noble. This last month I went to Barnes and Noble to buy a book of the month book that I did not put in my box. Like, I still got the 3 books because that's the maximum you can get monthly from book of the month. And then I still was like, wait, I should have gotten this one too. So then I went to Barnes and Noble. The 3 book of the month books come in and are still sitting on my bedside table, but I'm reading the one that came from Barnes and Noble. It's like there's no rhyme or reason to it. It's insane. So what we're talking about today, you picked the topic.
I did.
And it is a great topic.
Awesome.
We're going to talk about underrated books.
Yes. I was about to say that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Just
stole my spotlight.
Your one chance to.
It was Sedona's idea. Let me tell you about it.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm
sorry. Before I let you jump us off here, I went through my Goodreads list. Sedona and I had talked about different kind of like metrics on how we can decide what is underrated and what isn't. And she had suggested that we read books that have fewer than 5,000 ratings on Goodreads. Yes. Is that what you said?
Yes.
I went through books I have read for the last like 7,000 years, and nothing had fewer than like 40,000. Like, I think I'm only reading, I think because I don't read as much as I want to, I'm careful when I do read, and I'm reading more and more popular stuff lately. So I had like nothing. So anyway, good thing we tossed that out.
I also went through my list of books that I've read, and none of the fiction books that I liked had less than 5,000 reviews. You know, there were some outliers in there, but I didn't particularly like them, so I don't want to talk about them. But I do have a couple of nonfiction.
Oh, that were less than
5,000.
Okay, well, let's start with
ratings.
those then. I want to hear what those were.
Okay, so I think I listened to both of these. Yeah, in the last couple of years. The first one is A Fatal Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum. It's Murder in Ancient Rome. I just realized I forgot to get the author's name in there.
No author.
No.
Shame. Shame. No, we're a bunch of Googlers on this podcast. It's fine.
I wrote this book.
So it's A Fatal Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum.
Yes. Murder in Ancient Rome.
And you said it was nonfiction. Can you give us like a little plot scenario?
So it is about the prolific nature of violence, I guess, in ancient Rome, and how society then revolved around killing as entertainment, but also how murder as a crime was kind of formed in law. And so she kind of switches back and forth, the author, from ancient Roman murder and violence and what effect that has had on today's murder and violence. And it's a hilarious book. It made me laugh out loud a couple of times because the author is just a very good writer. And any nonfiction book I read has to read like a novel. Yeah. You know? And I think that's when people say they don't like nonfiction, they just haven't read the right nonfiction. Yeah. So for people that don't love nonfiction, I recommend this one and the next one I'm going to recommend. Okay. But I mean, it was an entertaining read.
I'm sold.
It's so good. Has a great cover too.
Is that what made you did you see it and you were just drawn to the cover?
Yeah. It's pink.
Okay.
It's a very good cover.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have no author, but I'm sure we can all Google it. Also, I'll put it on the Check Your Shelf Goodreads. Okay. And the author's name will be attached and properly credited.
I am so embarrassed.
It won't be Sedona. So what's your next nonfiction?
The next one is called Spying on the South by Tony Horwitz. He wrote Confederates in the Attic. I think it's probably his most famous book. But I love any book about the South, just growing up here. But Tony Horwitz, probably 2016, 2017, followed the trail of Frederick Law Olmsted. Frederick Law Olmsted. Epic journey across the American South in the 1850s. This man who later and during this trek was a famous architect. He actually designed Central Park, Frederick Law Olmsted. Okay. But he was just a very well-to-do man who traveled throughout the South and wrote about his journey. And, of course, back in the 1850s, he traveled by train, he traveled by horse. And so Tony Horwitz also did that.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And I believe crossed 11 states, but just meets the characters he meets along the way, and he talks to locals about the history of the South and what it means to them now, and talks to people from all walks of life and all socioeconomic
backgrounds.
And there's one part where he attends, I think, a mud wrestling competition in Louisiana. Like, of course, Frederick Law Olmsted did not do that. But Tony Horwitz goes off the beaten path a little bit, and it's just delightful.
So, approximately, what year did he do this journey?
2015, 2016.
Oh, so this is like a recent book.
But it came out in 2019, and Tony Horwitz actually passed away a few months after the release of this book. It was very sudden and unexpected, but it's one of the best audiobooks I've ever listened to. If you know nothing about the South, definitely if you grew up in the South or live in the South, I recommend it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll have to put that on my gigantic to read list. That sounds really good, actually.
It's very good.
I just realized as you were talking, I realized that I did find one book that I loved on my Goodreads list that I've read that had fewer than 5,000. And I think you'll like this too because we have similar nonfiction tastes. It's called The Castle on Sunset: Life, Death, Love, Art, and Scandal at Hollywood's Chateau Marmont by Sean Levy. And you'll probably recognize his name because he's written a recent book that's done really well. It's called like Funny People or something. It's about comedians.
Okay.
Sorry, Sean Levy. I should have looked into that more. But according to Goodreads, I've actually listened to this one twice.
Whoa.
Because I'm a bad, like, why would you get fresh content when you can just get like a 500-page book about one hotel and read it twice? So. But yeah, I was really surprised that one had. I don't know. You got me absolutely obsessed with how many ratings things have now.
It's interesting, yeah. And it's a little humbling when you think, or when I think I've read something very hip and and not well known, and then it has 400,000
yes
ratings. Yeah. Okay, well.
There was one book on my Goodreads list where I was like, I practically discovered this book. Nobody read this book until I started recommending it. And it had something like, it was like 127,000 reviews. So that's not.
We're not.
No,
special.
We're not. I'm not who I think I am. Okay, so this was a really good start to talking about underrated stuff. So now we're just going off of sheer opinion, right?
Okay.
Like that, right? We're not looking at any other kind of, because I'm not prepared with any other metrics for
Hannah.
how you would define.
Okay.
Well, do you want to just go ahead and keep talking about nonfiction then for a little bit and then shift over to fiction, or you want to switch it up?
Let's switch to fiction.
Okay, sounds good. All right. Well, hit me with one of your favorite, what you feel like is underrated fiction.
So one of my favorite books as a kid was Ruby Holler by Sharon Creech.
Yeah.
And it's not underrated. It's very famous. She's very famous. She wrote Walk Two Moons. She was my favorite author as a kid, and in fact, it's kind of made me fall in love with reading, especially Ruby Holler. All her books are just kind of about the magic of everyday life. Nothing extraordinary happens in them. They're children's books, I must add.
But like they're juvenile fiction, like they're chapter books.
Yes, yeah. Definitely upper elementary school age, I'd say. But I still love those books and have read them many times. And she made me fall in love with reading. I think adults would enjoy it too because it's fantastical in the sense of just enjoying the everyday.
Yeah.
And finding adventure in the everyday. And her books have really colored everything I read now and kind of how I see the world.
That's so cool.
So Sharon Creech, I love her.
So would you say that you would consider her underrated now because of like maybe when that book was written, like it's kind of fallen out of vogue, or are there?
I think so. I've never found another Sharon Creech fan.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
People have heard of a couple of her books, but I could really talk about her for hours.
This is one of my favorite books. Okay, so I did a book club several years ago at a diversity center, and it was for young adults. So it was like teenagers, and I led the book club, and I don't know, like go in with like these preconceived notions of what I thought people wanted to read based off of the New York Times Young Adult Bestseller list.
Right.
And
the law.
Yes. And they had absolutely different and better suggestions. So about 3 months in, when I had a real solid group coming, I just turned it over to them. I was like, we're going to do this backwards. I'm like, you're going to tell me what to read, and then it's like it's my book club too. Like I'm not just like I'm getting new content, you know, and it's almost like I was guaranteed a good book every month because they were so careful what they recommended, because they were so excited that an adult was listening to them and reading their choices. But my favorite book that we read was called Ramona Blue by Julie Murphy.
Okay.
And Julie Murphy wrote Dumplin' and Puddin'.
That's right.
And I think Dumplin' was made into it. Was it a Netflix show? I know Amy Poehler was attached to it. Maybe she produced it or something. And full disclosure, I've never read those books, but I know people love those. But this book was so delightful, and it was about Ramona is like a swimmer, and it's kind of like a coming of age story where she's gone back to her hometown and she's like reconnected with people from when she was younger, and she falls in love, but is she really in love? And it has not obviously, but it has LGBTQ themes, like with the Diversity Book Club. Everything we read had LGBTQ characters or something in it. And this one it's called Ramona Blue by Julie Murphy. I would read this book. I'm surprised that Goodreads is not telling me that I've read this book 4 times. I feel like I have. Maybe after the 3rd time I did not go through and tell it, because sometimes I feel
you weren't tracking this one.
No, I wasn't tracking that 4th one, but it's good, and the audiobook is excellent because I've listened to it also. You got another fiction?
No.
Oh. Sedona and I are coming off a long work day here. So, well, I have another fiction one.
Well, and if I do read fiction, it does tend to be popular, I guess, you know.
Yeah, because I want to read good stuff. And listen, let me tell you something, just as a sidebar. One of my friends, Jennifer Kimbrough, who is on here, she's been on here several times. She will read stuff where I would look at the cover and be like, ooh, I just don't know that that's fancy enough. Like, I don't know if enough money has been invested in this publication. And she is finding the best stuff, because it's like she's reading these series. Like, she really goes out on a limb, and she gives like books. She really will try things that I won't, because I'm too impatient and I'm too worried that I'm not going to like it. And I hate quitting a book once I've started it. And then I'm like, what if I finish a book I hate? Just out of principle of reading it. But I wish I was more like her. I feel like I would have more underrated reads.
Of course.
And when you hear my recommendation today, you're going to completely understand that, because it's like everybody in the world has read the book rec that I'm putting out there later. But one of my favorite Stephen King books, and I've talked about it briefly on the podcast before, is called Elevation.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
It's a short story.
Well, it's like a novella, and then it has a short story at the end. But it's really good. Like, it's like kind of like a feel-good kind of uplifting. Like, it's not what you would normally think.
Not at all what you would expect.
And give me Stephen King at his dankest, darkest, most evil, scariest. Like, I love Stephen King, but for this book to not be that and to still come from him, I think really shows like his power as a writer. Yeah.
I remember reading that, and even on the last page thinking, what?
Yeah.
Where is the horror?
Yeah, it was so good.
But it is good.
It seems like that short story at the end kind of filled that gap. I think it was pretty scary, but okay. Well, that's a pretty good list we've got of underrated books. So I'm interested to see what our listeners' favorite underrated reads are.
I know. That's what I want to read.
Yeah.
Buried treasure. Yeah. I do go for the nice cover.
Yeah.
Everybody's talking about, especially with fiction.
Right.
Just,
right.
Because I like some niche nonfiction books, so I will find some, diamonds in the rough. But with fiction, I'm not really on the lookout for kind of indie books. I guess more indie books. I just see the more popular ones.
Or they'll start out as indie, and then the next thing.
And then Reese Witherspoon.
Thank you.
Puts
And then
her
she
brand
gets it,
on
and then I will read it. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
That's what happens. Yeah. Well, do you want to stick around for the next segment and talk about what are we going to talk about? Book news and
Book
do some
news?
recommendations because I need more from you before you leave.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well,
Oh,
we will be right back. And we're back with Sedona. We've been talking about underrated fiction and nonfiction, and now we're going to move on to book news. We've got some big banned book news.
Good news.
Good news,
Good
finally.
news.
Librarians love it when the banned book news is good because it very rarely is.
Yes. That's an oxymoron.
It really is. So Book Riot has reported that Illinois is the first state to ban book bans.
Yes.
So they are saying that per the bill, the $62 million of funding that goes to the state's libraries will only be eligible for said funding if they, quote, adopt the American Library Association's Library Bill of Rights. Holla! Can
That's
you believe that?
amazing.
Yeah.
It
Or
belongs everywhere.
it really does. It really does. Or develop a written statement prohibiting the practice of banning books or other materials within the library or library system. That is bananas.
Come on,
in
Illinois.
the best way. Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah, that is so good. That's such good news.
Yeah.
Because we've just been overrun.
Yeah, it gives
with
me.
such bad
it
news.
gives me chills
Yeah.
because I've sort of ignored some of the bad news. Just
Right.
because, what can you do? But
Well,
be sad about it.
Right, and as librarians, I feel like every day we do everything that we can do to kind of, try to work on that issue. But yeah, it gets overwhelming.
Yes. Yeah.
So yay, Illinois!
Way to go, Governor
And
Pritzker.
Yes,
Shout out.
Governor J.B. Pritzker, you were awesome.
Yes.
And then, and this is very exciting. The do you remember during the pandemic? Was it during the? I'm going to tell this. I have talked about this on 3 different podcasts, and every single time I have given misinformation about it.
When you read the Casey Wilson book.
Oh my
during
god!
the pandemic.
Oh my god! I thought you were kidding when you said you were going to bring that up.
No, it's been on my mind all week.
The most underrated nonfiction memoir in American history.
There you go.
The Wreckage of My Presence by
Yes,
Casey Wilson.
It's on every list for you.
Really, every display.
Yeah, every display. You just carry a copy around.
Well, I have it ready. It's like there are several displays up here in nonfiction, and it's applicable to many. So, but the Brooklyn Public Library. This was last year. I'm looking at the news story, and I just said it was during the pandemic. I guess we're always in the pandemic now, but. Okay, so there was a Brooklyn Public Library started an initiative that granted young people access to the digital collection to get them the banned book materials that were possibly banned in their schools.
Yes.
So now the Seattle Public Library is doing the same thing.
Awesome.
So if you are, let's see, between the ages of 13 to 26, you can get online, get a library card, and have access to all of their this is the Seattle Public Library people.
Yeah.
All of their digital
Huge catalog.
Yes, can you imagine?
Man, that's wonderful. That's awesome.
Yeah, it really is. And Jennifer Kimbrough, again, friend of the pod, and famously unethical when it comes to how she procures her reading materials.
Amen.
Has already let me know that one of her kids has signed up for this.
That's awesome.
Yeah, her kids. Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
The scapegoat child.
Yes, she probably has no idea that she now has a Seattle Public Library.
Ooh, I gotta find a kid. I'm gonna grab the next one I see.
So, talking about banned books, what would you say your favorite banned book is?
I thought about it a lot, and I would say my favorite is Mouse.
Ooh, yeah, by
Art Spiegelman.
Art Spiegelman, yes.
It won the Pulitzer in 1992. The Complete Mouse, I must say. It came out in 2 volumes. One first in the 80s, then the 90s. So the complete set of Mouse that tells the whole story. And I'll never forget reading that book. It's a graphic novel.
Mm-hmm.
And I did a little bit of research on Art Spiegelman, and there's been a pretty recent banning of his book, actually in McMinn County, Tennessee.
Uh-oh. How close is that to hometown Sedona?
I don't know. I'm ashamed of them, so I don't know where they are regionally.
Okay.
But in January 2022, the graphic novel was taken out of their curriculum and libraries.
Wow.
For all students.
And that makes it an actual banned book, right?
Yes.
Because people do get confused about banned books versus challenged books. So, like, the first time it was, like, someone came forth and complained about it, that would make it a book challenge.
Right.
But the banning is when it's actually
removed. Yes.
Wow.
And it was over profanity and nudity, but you can't help but see, like, okay, this is a book about the Holocaust,
right?
Too. So, it's a really touchy ban.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
I bet that got a lot of press,
a lot of flack.
That's
and
awful.
From what I can tell, it is still banned. It was a little over a year ago, but because of that ban, Mouse sold 665,000 copies on Amazon, which was triple its number of sales the year before.
I mean, I'm just
saying. So it backfired
saying.
a little bit, as it usually does.
As it oft happens. Yes.
As it always does.
People don't understand what they're doing.
Yeah.
Like,
you're just making it more... Yeah, people are making it more desirable.
Yes.
As soon as you say you can't read something, people are going to read it. Like when Salman Rushdie was...
Oh my gosh, yes.
When he was attacked.
Yes.
Probably a year ago now.
Yes.
His book sold out on Amazon.
Yep.
They couldn't keep it in stock. I mean, it just... It makes them more juicy.
And when I was a kid, it's so funny you brought up Salman Rushdie. The first book banning situation that I remember was when he wrote and published the Satanic Verses.
Yeah.
So there was a whole thing going on about that didn't even have to do with book banning, but
right.
It was the 80s, and I think I'm almost 100% sure it was the 80s because I was so young, but people heard the title of the book, freaked out,
of course,
and was like, okay, so this is obviously Anton LaVey's Bible that he is teaching with, and it was a novel, it wasn't even
right. Yes.
So as soon as I was old enough, to check out, to move over to the adult section, which, granted, we're librarians, it's always way earlier.
Yes.
We're sneaking over there way
Absolutely.
earlier than other people, I think. But I checked out the Satanic Verses and read it, and I was like, what is the deal?
Right.
It was crazy. But yeah, I read it. And I think it's still, like you said, it's still happening today.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm glad that we got to talk about happy book banning things.
Yes, and everyone read Mouse. If you haven't read Mouse,
yes.
It's a harrowing read, but it's really important.
It's important, and it's also really graphically interesting.
Yes.
It was the first graphic novel I ever read where I was like, this is different. This is not what I usually envision.
Yeah, well, when I was looking stuff up about Spiegelman, and those books really paved the way for graphic novels now, especially graphic memoirs or nonfiction.
Yeah.
He really set the stage for the genre.
I could see that.
Yeah. Spiegelman's Mouse really paved the way for graphic memoirs today, because his is a memoir based on interviews that he had with his father, who survived the Holocaust.
Mm-hmm.
His mother also survived the Holocaust, but I don't think was alive at the time that he started the book. So it's him learning about the Holocaust through his father's eyes, and there's just so much depth to it once you actually not only read the book and see the images, the difficult images, but if you read anything about it, it's really something.
Yeah.
I recommend it to everybody. But like Alison Bechdel's book, Fun Home, was mentioned when I was looking up Spiegelman, and how Maus really set the stage for what we have now in nonfiction graphic novels, which I think has never been better.
I agree.
Nonfiction graphic novels are one of my favorite genres. They're just so creative.
Yeah.
And in fact, speaking of Maus, there's a beautiful graphic novel adaptation of Anne Frank's diary.
Oh, really? Is it like recently published?
Yes, just in the last couple of years. It's gorgeous.
So parents need to remember too that, like, if you have a reluctant reader, or if you have like a child with reading challenges, always look, because graphic novels have come so far.
Absolutely.
Always look in that section and see, because a lot of times they'll, those books are easier to pick up. They're more welcoming.
Yes.
Like, kids identify with them more. It's a better option for a lot of kids, and it's kind of that gateway into getting them to read other things.
Yeah. Yeah. Graphic novels are really in their prime right now.
We should do a graphic novel podcast. That's not like
graphic novels.
Marvel stuff. Like, do you know what I mean? Because I could do like a whole podcast on like Marvel comics, but like we should do one on graphic novels. I'll put that in my notes.
Yeah, I would love that.
Okay, so first, before we move on to recommendations, I need to ask you how many recommendations you brought. How many do you have?
Recommendation 3.
Okay, you followed the rules. Okay, so because I have read so few books lately, I only dug up 2 that I really wanted to recommend. So I'm going to let you go first, and we'll just bounce back and forth.
Okay, cool. Okay, my first recommendation, and I've read all of these or listened to all of these within the last year, but not all of them have been published within the last year. My first book recommendation is a fiction book called Agatha of Little Neon by Claire Luchette. It's about 4 young women who are nuns, and I know nothing about Catholicism or nuns, so I suppose this is a normal thing that nuns are sent off to a community to serve in a different church that maybe they were raised in. It sounded kind of like a Mormon.
Yeah. I can't remember the name of that, but no, where they like when they get a certain age, they go out into another community. Yeah. Okay, so like that,
to serve and to speak to the community. So they're sent to this very small town, and are working with a group of people in a rehabilitation center, and I think what a fiction book has to have for me to enjoy it is just a bunch of characters, a bunch of different types of characters. Books like this that have a lot of characters kind of remind me of working in the library, just working with everybody.
Yeah, all different
humanity. Yeah. It's humanity. It's everybody from every walk of life. And this book, every character, small or main character, has their own very unique life and personality, and it made me cry, this book. It's just it's sweet, I wouldn't say dark, but it gets deep. It's just lovely, and I listened to it, and it's not a very long book. I'd say the audio was like 6 hours.
Okay, nice. I love the short audio.
I love short books.
I do too.
I love short fiction books. It's kind of like, nowadays movies are all 15 hours long.
Yes, yeah.
If I see a movie that's an hour and a half, it's usually a really good movie.
Right.
Because they've had to cut all the fat out to fit it,
Yeah.
So they only put the important stuff in.
Yeah.
So that's how I feel about fiction books, at least, that are short. I usually lean towards those because I'm a slow reader, for one thing, but I just figure, and I'm usually correct in thinking that it's a better story.
Yeah, I've never thought of it that way, but I think you're right. I think I completely agree with that.
And
go ahead. Sorry.
Well, sometimes I like a sweeping narrative of a description of every tree in a scene. Sometimes I like that, but I just want a good story.
Right. So where did you hear about that book?
I think I was scrolling through Libby.
Okay. Libby, plug it.
Plug it. I'm going to plug Libby. Shout out Libby. It's a free app you can get with your library card.
Yes.
It's free audiobooks and ebooks, and that's what we were talking about with Seattle's digital collection. That's Libby.
It's Libby, basically. It's access to their Libby.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Agatha of Little Neon. I just saw, I think it had good ratings, and I saw it wasn't a very long book. So I just tried it. It also has a great cover.
Cool. Well, the first book I'm going to recommend is it's a little thing that no one has read. Nobody has heard of this book.
Okay. That's a bold statement.
I'm breaking some news here. Like, you're going to want to run to your bookstore and hope they have it in stock because it's so rare. It's called The Last Thing He Told Me by Laura Dave. Have you read that book?
The Last Thing He Told Me.
It's a Reese book, Reese Witherspoon book. They is
were
currently.
You being sarcastic?
Oh, I was being real sarcastic. Yeah, this is the one I was talking about earlier, and I was like, wait till you hear my underrated recommendation.
No, you could have. As soon as you said Reese, I realized you were being sarcastic.
Oh, yeah.
But other than that,
I kind of figured that you would have read this one, honestly, because you're always a step ahead of me on the really good, like, kind of suspense type things. But
I do enjoy suspense.
It's really good. It's super good. They've made a TV show. Reese Witherspoon has produced it. It's on, I think it's on Apple Plus. I think wait, is it? It's on something we subscribe to specifically to watch this show. The show is really good. It follows the book really closely, which I was happy about because I had a real bad experience with Daisy Jones and the Six, and that's going to be another podcast when I heal a little more. But the book is so good. Like, I could not put it down, and it's real hard for me to find a book that I can't put down because I can always, with ADD, like, find 7 other things to do and to think about. And also, I will just switch back and forth between books. That's a big thing that I do. And this, I read the whole thing pretty much over a couple of days until it was finished. So good.
That's a great recommendation.
Jamie Lannister plays, he's in the show. And he's a great actor.
He's great.
And completely, terribly ugly. So hard to look at.
What? Oh my God. What? Every sarcastic remark is just passing me by.
Well, you're not I just realized you're not a Game of Thrones person, are you?
I have read every one of the books.
Did you watch the shows?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, then I don't have any other excuses for you. So that was The Last Thing He Told Me by Laura Dave. You've probably already read it if you're listening to this podcast because I'm way behind on this train, but it was super, super good.
Or if you cannot pick up on Jamie's sarcasm, like the person sitting across from her, maybe you haven't heard of it. I was going to say, too, when you said you read it in one sitting or you couldn't stop thinking about it, I will stop a book if I don't like it. I usually give it 50 pages, and if it hasn't captured me, I put it away.
That's a good rule.
Yeah. But if I'm thinking about it, when I'm elsewhere, when I'm not reading it, I know it's got me. I know it's a good book.
Have you ever, read a book, finished it, rated it on Goodreads, and then after thinking about it for several days, gone back and altered the rating?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I also no longer rate books on Goodreads.
Oh.
Yeah. I don't give them ratings. I just mark them read.
Wow.
Because I do that so often. I change my mind so often. Yeah. My Goodreads is pretty bleak.
That is, wow. I think the reason that's so, mind-boggling to me is I use that as how I know what to reread because my 5-star rating on Goodreads means I will reread it.
Okay.
I would like to reread it. And because I'm a rereader, I need that list handy.
Yeah. I'm not a rereader.
I didn't know that about you.
I'm not. I have reread, 2 different books. One of them's Lolita. I've read that a few times. And We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson.
I've never read that.
It's excellent.
I need to read it.
It's short. It's a short one. It's a short one. Yeah.
Put that on my list. Well, what's your next recommendation?
My next recommendation is Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell, which is definitely not underrated. I think it's actually going to be a play in London, at least. It's become a stage play. But it's about the life, well, not really the life, but the marriage and family of William Shakespeare. So it switches back and forth from the time William Shakespeare met his wife, Anne Hathaway, to the present, quote unquote present, which is during the plague in which one of his children passes away. And his child named Hamnet, his son, passed away from the plague, and he then wrote Hamlet to kind of work through his grief about it. And I knew nothing about this. I know nothing about.
So this is a
Shakespeare.
nonfiction book?
No, it's historical fiction.
This is historical fiction.
Yes, and it's really, it is so well written. It's a beautifully written book. It's never explicitly said, like, William Shakespeare, the great playwright. I don't think he's even named.
Oh, wow.
In it. And then his wife, who is Anne Hathaway, she's called Agnes throughout the whole book. And I had to do research later because I thought he wasn't married to an Agnes. But apparently on her birth certificate, she's named Agnes.
Oh, that's interesting.
Or it's something her father called her.
Yeah. So there's a connection.
Yeah, so it is very subtly about William Shakespeare, though it is totally based on meeting Anne Hathaway, falling in love, having this very passionate romance, and then they had twins and another girl, but then it's about not the unraveling of their marriage at all, but just the rough patches that it went through as he was becoming a famous playwright. He was living in London trying to get his stuff on stage, while Anne Hathaway, was at home with the children. But then it culminates in the writing of Hamlet.
Okay.
It's very good.
And tell us it's called Hamnet. And who's the author?
Maggie O'Farrell.
How'd you find that one? I'm going to drive you crazy with this question.
It was very popular when it came out.
Oh, it was? Okay.
I just remember seeing it everywhere when it first came out. And I don't usually lean into historical fiction. If I'm reading fiction, I like contemporary.
Yeah, me too.
But this one, I think I got an arc of it. Yeah.
Okay.
And
what's that for people?
Advanced Reader's Copy.
Very good. Yes.
I got it at a library convention in 2020. It was right before everything.
Oh my God! Before the world fell apart.
It was.
We were there together. Not together. We were there at the same time. We went to one thing together. That was. That was so scary.
Yeah.
A library convention. Just to go on a tangent, I had no concept of how huge a national library convention could be until we went. This was the Public Library Association convention of 2020.
Yes.
Is that right? And it was the end of February and wasn't locked down like March 14th. It was like 2 weeks later.
2 weeks later, yeah.
It was we are lucky we are not dead.
Yeah.
We were shoulder to shoulder.
Yeah, everyone in there,
I'm
sure, was horrified.
It's so crazy, like, looking back on the before times now and being
so
like,
strange.
Well, and it's the room full of librarians, so everybody had researched the text and knew what was coming, and we all still
but all the free books.
That's true, yeah.
Yes. So this was a book I had since 2020.
Okay.
And I'm trying to get rid of all the books I own. Not rid of them, but read through them. To see if I like them or not. So that was one of them, and I loved it. And she has another one, I believe that came out last year. It's historical fiction too, but has nothing to do with the same, I think it's not even set in the same century, but it's called The Marriage Portrait, that I own now and do want to read because just the writing was gorgeous in Hamnet.
Okay, I'm going to check into that.
Yeah.
I'll take your word for it because I'm not usually a big historical fiction
Yeah.
person either, but that sounds really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds really interesting. So my next recommendation is this is so hilarious that this is another gigantic blockbuster bestseller. I started Dune by Frank Herbert.
Bless your heart.
Have you read it?
I attempted it.
Well, I was like laying in bed and I was like, I should start a book. I wanted to read that. I was reading something, but I wanted like a shorter thriller. Okay. So I look over on my bedside table and I start reading Dune. None of that made any sense because it was the polar opposite of what I thought I was wanting to read. I got so sucked in, so I'm not finished with it yet, but so far I like it. And I thought, I'll get caught up before the second movie comes out. But this thing is it's huge.
A brick.
And I guess I wonder, I haven't seen the movie. I went into this knowing very little. Actually, I take that back. I saw the original movie when I was a teenager on VHS because I'm so old. But I haven't seen the new movie. And do you know if is the second movie based off the second book, or are we still dealing with the first?
I do not know. Actually, I'm not sure where the narrative ends for the first book.
I'm going to have to...
But it is definitely cuts at the end in the middle of a scene.
Oh, maybe it's the middle of this book. Good, maybe I'm reading two movies is what you're saying. I hope so too.
But I do not know because I stopped reading that book.
Okay. Okay, well, we'll see how it goes.
There weren't enough sandworms in it.
Were there not?
No. I wanted more sandworm action.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'll be prepared for that.
Spoilers. Not enough sandworms.
So what's your last recommendation?
It is a nonfiction called The Indifferent Stars Above by Daniel James Brown.
Okay.
And it is about the Donner Party.
Oh, yes.
Yes. Yes.
I thought it was going to be a pretty feel-good, uplifting self-help
Not
thing.
at
Then
all.
you said Donner Party.
It is
oh my
the
God.
opposite of that.
So is it set up like a true crime novel? I guess I could shut up and just let you tell us about it.
Well, it's that's probably, I guess that's kind of what drew me in, was just the salacious, of course, everybody's like, ooh, the Donner Party. But this book made me cry so much because it put such a human faces. It gave everybody in the Donner Party who faced just the worst thing I've ever heard.
Right.
Actually.
Right.
It's horrifying and so sad. So sad.
I'm going to have to read it.
And I recommend it. I recommend it to everyone.
You're going to cry so hard. Read it.
It's great. You'll be devastated.
I knew you were going to bring the noise with these book recommendations. These are excellent. I want to put Dune down right now and start reading.
Put Dune down. I do not recommend Dune. I'll say it here first.
So you canceled out my book recs, I guess. If I'm recommending it and you're like, no, don't.
No. Shh. Please listen. Yeah, I was hoping, before I realized we were doing this part of the podcast, I was hoping I'd be able to talk about it for underrated books, but it is not. I mean, it has a couple of hundred. It has more ratings than an underrated book would, but still not enough. It is still, and that has. I haven't read any other full-length books about disaster stories like that.
Right. Yeah.
But it's gotten me listening to podcasts about tales of survival and stuff, and I have moved away from true crime. Mm-hmm. It bothers me a little bit more than it ever did. Just how big the genre has gotten.
Yeah.
Bothers me a little bit as entertainment. So this is kind of a step down, perhaps,
right,
of a salacious tale of murder. It is a harrowing tale of death.
And give us the name and author again.
Am I selling it?
You're selling it. You keep looking at. She keeps looking at me like, when can I stop talking about this book? I'm like, tell me more about the Donner book. So it was called what?
The Indifferent Stars Above by Daniel James Brown.
Wow.
Beautiful book.
Now that I know that's about the Donner Party and I hear the title, that's deep.
It's sad.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I want to read that.
Yeah.
Sedona, this has been fun.
Yes.
This has been really fun.
This has been very good.
Well, we'll have to come up with some more things that we can talk about.
I already have.
Okay, good.
I've formulated things as we've been talking.
And what's funny about this podcast for me is that every time I record one, I realize how little I actually get to sit down and talk about what I'm reading.
Absolutely.
Because I'm not in an active book club right now. And even if I was, it would be one book.
Right.
So
Yeah, I never do this.
Yeah, this is fun.
Thank you, Jamie.
Everybody should do this. Everybody who loves books should just go get them a book.
Start a podcast. But nothing better than this.
No. Oh, I don't know.
Okay.
Just send me an email at checkyourshelfpodcast.com.
Yeah.
You can just come on this one.
Yes. Don't make a competing podcast.
But what if they know books that I don't know about that I want to read? See, we're all in it. It's good-hearted. We're all in it for the same thing. Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's what happens in book world.
I brought a competitive nature to the podcast. Are we going to talk about TBR? Do we have time?
We do. I almost forgot.
Okay. I have 2.
Okay. Give us
I have 2.
So this is what Sedona is looking forward to reading.
Yes. To be read. And this is based solely off of what I have on hold at the library.
Okay.
So, the first one is, both of these are very new books. The first one is Rough Sleepers by Tracy Kidder. And I'm just going to read because I just haven't read it at all, so I'm going to read the official blurb.
Okay.
Tracy Kidder shows how one person can make a difference as he tells the story of Dr. Jim O'Connell, a man who invented ways to create a community of care for a city's unhoused population, including those who sleep on the streets, the rough sleepers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I think I've heard of that one.
Yeah, it's nonfiction. I think Tracy Kidder is a pretty prolific author, though I haven't read any of his work.
Okay.
And then my next one is called The Wonder Paradox, Embracing the Weirdness of Existence and the Poetry of Our Lives.
Yes, I have heard of that one.
By Jennifer Michael Hetch.
Yeah, and give us, what's that? It's just basically what the title says, right? Is what the book is about.
Yeah. The official blurb says, so where shall we find our magic? How do we celebrate milestones? Which texts can focus our attention but still offer space for inquiry, communion, and the chance to dwell for a dazzling instant in what can't be said?
Lovely.
I know. It sounds wonderful.
I want to read that too.
Yeah.
So I've only got one.
Okay.
But you only had 2,
yes.
right? And I did not know this book was even coming out until last week, and I feel like I have failed. But then I realized it was fiction, so
yeah.
I give myself a little slack with that.
Yes.
Tom Hanks has a new book coming out.
He does. I just saw the cover today.
The Making of Another Major Motion Picture Masterpiece.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a time jumper, it sounds like. And I bet it's just delightful because he is delightful. And I bet he typed this on his typewriter.
Oh, really?
He's a typewriter guy.
No.
Oh, okay. When we finish with this, you've got to Google Tom Hanks typewriter.
Okay.
You have to. Just do it. You have to. Oh, my God. I'm so glad that I get to bring that into your life. Yes.
Okay.
But, yeah, so that one's coming out, and I went ahead and put myself on hold for it. And so if anybody else is interested in this book, if our library is any... is any, what am I trying to say? Like kind of scale as to how popular this book is going to be. I would go ahead and get on the list now because this one I think is going to be huge. Yeah. So, all right.
Cool.
Okay. Anything else?
That's great.
Any other book, anything? Any other segments I forgot to do? Like
no.
TBR?
No.
Okay. Well, then come back soon. And we'll.
That sounded like a demand.
It did.
Come back.
I will. Record this podcast again very soon.
I will.
Okay. Well, this
really
was fun.
enjoyed it.
Thank you, Sedona.
Thank you, Jamie.
All right. I will see you later.
Okay.
No, I don't like that ending.
Happy reading. Happy reading to us all.
Happy reading to us all.
Sounds like
Everyone.
Tiny Tim.
Yeah, it does. It does. Also a book that's based off A Christmas Carol, which is a book by Charles Dickens. So we're still on topic. Good.
Yeah.
All right. And scene. I'll talk to you later.
Bye, Jamie.
Bye. And that's it for this month's episode of Check Your Shelf. Be sure to head over to thealabamatake.com and see what else we have going on. If you're on team Bama Rush Sucked, you'll want to listen to the latest episode of Taking It Down. I'm also super fond of one of the hosts of the Alabama Slam podcast, so if wrestling's your thing, give it a listen. Otherwise, we'll catch you next time as we talk books, and more books. Thanks for listening.